God of War 2018 is a video game released by Santa Monica Studios for the PS4. It follows the story of Kratos, the disgraced Greek god of war, trying to give his wife's ashes a final resting place, while also dealing with the trials and tribulations of being a father. Little did I know that this game would end up changing my life in a completely unexpected way. And this is a car. A 2011 1.5 litre Renault Fluence, the first and to date only car I've ever owned. It served me well so far, apart from the odd burst brake line here and there and a light on the dashboard I'll just choose to ignore. I've absolutely no problem driving it, but that wasn't always the case. It was quite the opposite actually. You see, I've always had this irrational fear of driving. I'm not sure where it came from. My guess is it was either from having some leftover trauma after watching my father driving with just his knees and not using his hands at all. I was absolutely terrified that he was going to careen off the road and send us into a ditch. Or maybe it came from a reoccurring dream I had for years where my mother would leave me abandoned in the car alone and I would be forced to drive the car home by myself, but on that drive I would choke on a piece of chicken and that would cause me to lose control of the vehicle, swerve off the road and crash into a pole, sending me through the windscreen. A weird small little detail of the dream that I remember for some reason is that the impact of the crash would cause the piece of chicken that had lodged in my throat to fly out of my mouth Heimlich maneuver style. Yeah, I don't get it either. I don't even remember how the dream ended. Did I die? Did I survive? Did I get another chance to finish off my chicken? I guess we'll never know. But what I do know is that driving has always been so scary to me. Even just the thought of it would cause my chest to get heavy, my palms to get clammy and give me such bad stomach ache. And it wasn't just the fear of getting into an accident, hurting or potentially killing either myself or someone else in the process, but the actual physical operation of the car. I just had absolutely no faith in myself that I could figure out and overcome the actual logistics of operating a machine this large and in theory this dangerous. So how would I tackle this? I simply wouldn't. I'd never made a conscious decision to never learn to drive, but as the years went by and I got older, it's almost as if I just blocked it out of my mind. It seemed like I never needed it. I never lived in an area that required me to travel a long distance, and I was happy to walk if I needed to, within reason. Side note, what is a reasonable walking distance to you? Like if I said to you, oh don't worry, the restaurant's only half an hour away, we can walk it, would you think that's a crazy, unrealistic thing to do? Or would you be up for it? I was so used to it at that point that anything from like a 30 to a 45-minute walk seemed reasonable to me. But anyway, all of that changed when I met my lovely partner Keely. You see, Keely had been driving from a very young age and already had her full license by the time I met her. This meant that any road trips, any late night drives, even any spins into Tesco for a well-earned sweet treat, Keely was the driver. Now I was content with my passenger princess title, but I'm sure as you can imagine, after a while it became a little unfair that Keely had to ferry us everywhere. So after a little convincing and a whole lot of nearly throwing up, I contacted a driving instructor and began down the long, arduous road, pun certainly intended, of completing my driving lessons. And I was absolutely terrible. I just couldn't get my head around the clutch. My road position was all over the place. Every time I would change gears, the car would stall and stutter violently. I mean, forget about parking. And reversing was basically a death sentence for anyone who was behind me. Mix all of these technical failures with the fact that during all of this, I could barely breathe with the amount of terror that was flowing through me, and it just felt like the whole thing was hopeless. Keely was even nice enough to take me out in her car in between lessons to get a bit more practice in, which seemed to yield some minor results, but I struggled with any sort of consistency. Now, I know what you're thinking. What does any of this have to do with God of War? Well, at the time I was going through my lessons, I had just moved into new student accommodation, and one of my friends had a PlayStation which he conveniently set up in the sitting room. Me being a die-hard Xbox player for the last 10 years or so at that point, I had missed out on a lot of classics like Uncharted and The Last of Us, so I saw this as a great opportunity to catch up. The first game that really got my attention though was God of War, which was included in the PS Plus subscription, so I downloaded it straight away. I had played the original series when I was younger, but I heard the reboot was fantastic, so I was eager to get stuck in. And let me tell you, God of War is such a good video game. Half RPG, half hack and slash with sprinkles of Soulsborne-like combat that's also unique enough to stand out as its own style. Mix this in with Metroidvania-inspired level design, all tied together with an amazing art style set to the backdrop of Norse mythology. And if that wasn't good enough, the story of God of War is one of, if not my favourite video game narrative of all time. I can't do it justice in this video, but to be brief, it tells a really beautiful story about coping with loss, confronting your past, fulfilling promises, and struggling with parenthood. You should absolutely play it if you have a chance. I can't recommend it enough. But it wasn't God of War's story that helped me learn to drive. Oh no. It was actually one of the game's side quests. You see, God of War had an optional side quest where you could hunt down and fight various Valkyrie warriors in mini boss fights, claiming their helmets for yourself. They were all slightly different from one another, but none of them were too difficult. Once you defeat all 8 of these mini bosses and place their helmets on the thrones at the aptly named Council of the Valkyries, you would unlock the final Valkyrie boss fight, Sigrun. Sigrun was much more difficult than all of the previous fights. She combined a lot of tactics and attack patterns from the previous Valkyries and combined them all into one faster, stronger and harder hitting package. I was playing on the hardest difficulty in the game, so Sigrun whooped me around the boss arena and killed me over and over and over and over and over again. I sat there on a stained leather white couch in my student accommodation with my friends surrounding me, laughing at how frustrated I was getting with the bird lady who was painting the ground with my blood. But I didn't get disheartened. I did what I always done in difficult sections or boss fights in video games. A skill that I'd mastered from years of staying awake till 5 AM in the morning, having my retinas burned by the flashing pixels. I'd study her patterns, watch for openings to know when to be aggressive or defensive, learn to recognize her movements that'll telegraph what her next move will be, perfect my timings on when to strike, when to switch weapons, when to use special attacks, how long to attack, when to block, when to parry, all while managing Kratos' resources, for the lack of a better term, like how far can he dodge, how much can he heal, how fast can he walk or sprint away. Most enemies in video games are the same at their core. Learn the mechanics, recognize what you need to do to deal with that mechanic at that specific moment in time, do it, and either defeat the enemy or move on to the next mechanic and learn what you need to do in that specific moment in time. Do it, rinse and repeat until they're defeated. And sometimes you're doing all of this in fractions of a second, juggling different mechanics from different enemies all at the same time in different shapes, sizes and forms, figuring out which one to prioritize first, but in principle keeping the same idea of problem solving throughout. Using that strategy, eventually I did defeat Sigrun and I was delighted in that moment. High fives all around. But life went on. That night before I went to bed, I wasn't thinking about my triumph at the Council of the Valkyries. I was thinking about the impending, building dread that was sitting at the bottom of my stomach because I had my next driving lesson the following morning. The next day, I reluctantly woke up. I dragged myself to the lesson, and at first nothing was different. I had the same difficulties as before. Couldn't get the car to go, couldn't get the car to stop, taking turns when I shouldn't, not taking turns when I should. Just generally being a menace to other road users who were unfortunate enough to be on the road at the same time as me. But then, something amazing happened. I remembered God of War fighting Sigrun, initially struggling with her, but slowly over time learning her patterns and using it against her. And that's when I had the light bulb moment. The realization that I genuinely believe led to me ever being able to fully learn to drive. The car is a boss fight. Now stay with me now. The car is a boss fight. Let me elaborate. I don't know what happened. Looking back, I feel like it was the ADHD riddled brain kicking in, but I just translated the different functions of the car to the different boss fight mechanics. I seem to be able to juggle those no problem, so surely I could figure out this driving thing. The correct moment to make a turn, the same as timing the correct moment to dodge an attack. Where exactly to position the car on the road and constantly making micro adjustments to fix this, the same as where was the correct position to stand during the boss fight and constantly making small adjustments to give you the best advantage. When was the best time to go up or down the gears? Look for the signs. How does the car feel? How does the car sound? This was no different than figuring out the correct time to switch weapons, the correct time to attack. Look for subtle movements, sound cues. How does the pattern and flow feel? If you can learn this, you'll be right more often than not. Knowing when, where and how long to check each of your mirrors, well, that's just resource management, like constantly looking over your health, stamina and special attack meter, all while keeping your main focus at the center of your attention. In God of War, it was Sigrun, darting my eyes away from her just temporarily to check on how Kratos was doing. And in the car, it was the road, the car in front of me, the roundabout. My resources were my mirrors, my blind spots, my surroundings. I could keep listing examples, but I think you get the point. Immediately when I made this mental switch, I seen an improvement. Look, I doubt I'll ever be track leader in F1, but this literally was a line in the sand moment for me. I could clearly mark and define the period of learning to drive as before I made this mental change and after I made this mental change. In a perfect world, this story would usually end with me saying I went on to pass my test first time with flying colours, but that was never going to be the case. I did pass my test first time, but the car cut out 3 times and I was 1 away from failing. There was other issues that weren't perfect, like reversing around a corner and some of my positioning being off, but I'd done enough. I'd passed and I'd never have to take that oogly boogly big scary test again. Keely, of course, was delighted I'd passed. She was long overdue to take over my passenger princess role, even if she still has minor doubt over my ability to keep her alive while I'm driving to this day. I mean, let's face it, she's probably right. Now this may all sound over the top and exaggerated, but I assure you, I was so terrified of driving. I had brought myself to the verge of tears many times just thinking about it. I had gotten so used to the pit in my stomach all week leading up to a lesson and the relief I'd feel after I did it. So what exactly changed? I was still driving this 2-ton mass of metal debt speeding down the road at over 100 kilometers an hour, bracing myself for that moment where I'd make a mistake and irreversibly change my life and the lives of others for the worse forever. But that's exactly what changed. I wasn't driving a 2-ton mass of metal debt. I wasn't speeding down the road at an uncontrollable pace. And nobody was in danger. I was just in the middle of a boss fight, failing over and over again, learning patterns over and over again, implementing what I had learned in fractions of a second, over and over again, all while micro-juggling 100 different things at once. God of War had trivialized one of the biggest fears of my life into a manageable and, more importantly, repeatable obstacle that I didn't even realize I was prepping for every time I was frustrated with a glowing red weak spot, a tanky health bar, an unblockable attack, or a multiple phase boss fight. So what's the lesson here? What can parents learn from this? Learn from my journey? I think it's to let your kids play as much video games as they want for as long as they want. Okay, maybe don't only let them play video games, but do recognize that they can create a unique opportunity to teach perseverance, emotional regulation, and creative problem-solving skills in ways that sometimes schools can't. But what do I know? I'm just a guy who waited until he was 25 for his girlfriend and a fictional bearded meathead with questionable parent skills to teach him how to drive. Truly one of life's greatest role models. I've been Cormac Wheatley. Safe driving and safe gaming. Thank you for watching.